Welcome to Deepen with Pastor Joby Martin. The Church of 1122 is a movement for all people to discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. And we're praying this message helps you deepen your relationship with Him. Now let's dive in.
All right, welcome back to the Deepen podcast for a new series called When He Asks. Really unique. And Pastor Joby, why don't you set us up for why we're doing this series and why in 2024?
Have you ever talked to people that they'll say they have questions for God, or I want to ask God these questions? Well, there are questions to God in the Bible, but more than that, in the New Testament, there's lots of questions that God asked people. Like Jesus asked over 300 questions, but He only answers like a handful, somewhere between like 4 or 5, 3 to 8. And so this will be, it's kind of a topically exegetical sermon. So we're going to pick 5 or 6 of the 307 questions that Jesus asked, and we're going to unpack them. Because think about how important it must be if Jesus asked something of you and me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that rhymed.
Ooh.
I didn't mean for it to, but it did.
You're a poet. You didn't know it. So if the question's important, also the asker of the question's important too. Pastor Britt, you're preaching this weekend. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I have an opening question that's not related to the text. What is a question you've been asked in your life that stands out as like a life-altering, life-shaping question?
Well, thanks for the no prep on that one. I think the hardest question to answer, to go all Bible about it, is in Psalm 23. David writes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I think the hardest question to answer in life is, what do you want? And so that's one that I always come back to over and over and over again. And we're going to dig into that we're all wired for pleasure, and as designed by God, that there's something innate in us that the simple word that we use is happy, that we're all wired for happy. And the question, what do you want? Well, I want to be happy. I want to experience a fulfilled life full of pleasure. But the real question is, what do those words mean, and how do you get it, right? And so I think what do you want is a powerful question. It's like, on one level, it's kind of hard to answer as you head like toward the holidays and Christmas. The older you get, when people are like, what do you want for Christmas? It just gets harder to answer.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about?
Well, you start giving answers that your parents used to give that you thought were dumb, cheesy answers. Like you just want everybody to be together, and you just want people to be happy, and you just want, Yeah. I think when I read a question, I tend to ask this more of other people. So this is a long way to get to your answer. But when I read Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, there's one line in there that says, when you're trying to figure out what to do with your life, don't ask what this world needs, ask what makes me come alive. And what this world needs is for men to come alive. And so I will ask people as they're trying to navigate what's God's plan and will and purpose for my life, well, what makes you come alive? So for me, like teaching the Bible and leading this church, I never feel more alive than when I'm doing that thing. So this is very much in line with some like Dr. Piper stuff when we find our greatest delight in Him doing the thing He's called us to do. And then I also think it's a great affirmation. The first time I ever preached, Coach Lee said to me, he said, "Boy, when you preach the Bible, I see 2 things happen. I see you come alive." He used that language. I see you come alive. I see them come alive. And so I think that's a great question as to what are you going to do with this one and only life that you have? What makes you come alive?
Wasn't really a question, though, based on how I understand the story. He didn't really.
No. He voluntold me.
I'll give you one more Bible one that stands out to me. When God says to Jonah, "Do you do well to be angry?" I don't get angry a lot, but I get frustrated. And so sometimes you feel the Spirit asking you that question, do you do well to be angry? And it's just like, no. Like the answer is always no.
Isn't the first thing Jesus ever asked the disciples is, what do you want?
What do you want?
I think that's the first thing he ever says. They're on the seashore, and he goes, "What do you want?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like this deep. You know, they're fishing for their dad, and they fished all night and hadn't caught anything. And he's, I think there's a lot to it. Like, what you want is not going to be found where you're looking. Follow me, and you will find everything that you were designed to want.
He also says, "Who are you seeking? Who are you looking for?"
Mm-hmm.
I love the one with the beggar by the pool. He says, "What do you want me to do for you?"
Yep.
Is that the blind beggar? I mean, what a question. Do you want to be healed, is the one he says. Yeah. Well, we're in Luke chapter 6, and wow, just a few verses, so jam-packed. Pastor Britt talked to us about fruit and why it indicates so much about what kind of tree you are.
Yeah, the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is a big fan of agricultural illustration. Trees are a big deal. If you go to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in Genesis, it's kind of the first tree that we encounter. And a great question to think about is they had the entire garden, all dominion over the whole thing, and they're just kind of hanging around the one tree that you can't have anything. You're not supposed to have anything to do with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the fact that it wasn't called the tree of sin, the fact that it was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a whole nother layer. But anyway, trees are important. Why is that? Because trees grow through a process. Trees grow and they produce things. So you go all the way to, historically, the tree in the middle is the tree of Calvary, the cross that Jesus hung on. There was much eternally significant fruit bore that day on the cross, right? And that tree matters a ton. And then the tree of life we see at the end of the book. And so the interesting thing about trees is it's not like you can just throw a seed in any soil in any conditions and it grow. And so to your point about Jesus asking questions that have very, very layered answers, I think that's a part of the Luke 6. It's one thing to look at it really on one level, and it just says, "For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit." And it's like, well, of course, an apple tree doesn't produce lemons, or a healthy tree doesn't produce rotten fruit. But the question is, how does a healthy tree produce healthy fruit? Just because you throw an apple seed in any soil, in any conditions, does not necessarily mean that good apples are going to come out. And Jesus explains all these things throughout parable of the sower. We look at it, the parable of the weeds in Matthew 13. We're going to talk about that, I'm sure, in a minute. But the bottom line is this, is that the gospel does not make bad trees good trees. It makes dead trees alive trees, right? And I think that's a really important thing to think about, is it's not that there was no tree. I was born. I had a soul. I was living in a direction. I was a dead tree producing no fruit, the way Jesus would say it. I was producing no fruit in accordance with repentance. None. The only fruit growing on my tree was self-righteousness fruit. It was unhealthy, destructive fruit in partnership with the kingdom of darkness, counterfeit fruit. The gospel comes along and shows me how dead I am, and doesn't make me a new tree. It removes me and plants me anew. Mm-hmm. And the gospel is what grows me. The gospel is what sustains me, and the gospel is what grows the fruit on the tree. So that's where it starts.
You mentioned the agricultural imagery through the Bible. I mean, aren't you so glad he didn't use computers? I mean, just think about how long throughout history those would have been irrelevant examples, or even now in places that are not developed, there's relevance to agricultural imagery. And so the world as the theater of God's story, you see so much wisdom in things like this. One of the things I noticed as you were talking was that, and this is going to be unpacked throughout the rest of this text, but Jesus is getting at seen versus unseen, right? The layers, and what's an appearance versus what's evidence. So you can look really good on the outside. Like if you've got a tree in your yard, it might look really good, But if it's a fruit tree and there's no fruit coming out, you know you have a problem. And then vice versa. Like it might look kind of bad, but then if the fruit's still healthy, you know there's still some life in it. And so he's saying that things aren't always what they seem. At least in part, he's saying that about us.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a part of Jesus' teachings where he's talking about your intention or what it is that you say you believe. That's not what this text is about. This text is about what your behaviors reveal that you believe.
Yeah.
And certainly identity precedes activity. But if your identity is in Christ, the activity will follow. Another way to say it is that when your heart falls in love or comes alive to Christ and to the kingdom, then your habits will follow. Some habits at different speed than others, just like fruit grows at different speeds based on the tree and based on the conditions, but fruit will grow nonetheless.
Pastor Joby, you have a great illustration about the 2x4 and the orange. You know, like it's called produce, it's called fruit for a reason, right?
Yeah, if you go back to Luke 6:17, you find out that, you know, he's talking to a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all over the place. So they're mixed in, like Jesus followers and, you know, skeptics, Pharisees, Sadducees, those kind of folks. And so most of those folks they had misunderstood the Old Testament, and they believed that if I add these external acts to my life, then I'm okay with God. Mm-hmm. So that would be the equivalent of nailing an orange to a 2x4 and calling yourself an orange tree. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if you've been around Bible study for a minute, and a lot of the text of Luke 6 sounds familiar, it's because Jesus preaches the same sermon twice. He preaches it on a mountain one time and on a flat place another time. And so in Matthew chapter 5 and following, it's the Sermon on the Mount. And then theologians, this one, some reason isn't as popular, the Sermon on the Plain. Mm-hmm. And so what you can also do is you can compare his sermon notes back and forth to like get a little more commentary on the thing. And so on the Sermon on the Mount, talking about the same thing, he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You'll recognize their fruits. So watch out if somebody shows up and they don't have God-glorifying intentions, or they inverse the order and they talk about activity as if it precedes identity, because that's what the Pharisees did. Mm-hmm. They were dead. They were whitewashed tombs. They did not have a relationship with God. If they did, they would have known Jesus. It was all about external activity. And so he gives this incredible illustration that no. The external activity is produced from an inward relationship with God, like a seed planted that turns into something.
Yeah. What are some modern day examples of people trying to do external things to transform the inside? So trying to go outside in versus inside out.
You see, the problem is that I know the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but this is where this can get a bit wonky. You can show up to church a bunch expecting God to do something to you as a reward versus showing up with a pure heart to worship God and him changing you from the inside out. You know, you can try to do things like, let's say you throw a little money in the giving box because you've got a job interview coming up and you think it's going to do you well. And then you begin to try to treat God like a lucky charm or a genie as opposed to seeing him for who he really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, church attendance. I think some of the things that would have been, would qualify or classify in what the Catholic Church kind of dubbed sacraments, the partaking of this practice or communion, or it's religious practice or rote religious practice, disconnected from the saving work of Jesus. It's works-based righteousness in the way. I think, a lot of times that I think anything that you do that can terminates only on what you get out of it, you've got to be really careful, especially when that is in the realm of religion.
Here's one. You're struggling, you and your spouse just aren't getting along, right? You fight all the time and whatever, and somebody says, you need counseling. And all you do is, especially if you go to a counselor that does not have a biblical worldview, and all that is worked on are things like communication tactics. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling you, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work. Mm-hmm. The heart of it is, husband, you better love her like Christ loved the church. Mm-hmm. Period. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even gonna talk to the wife because the husband is the head, so it starts with him. Mm-hmm. And the moment he just tries to fix things with the latest like tips and tricks book, the problem is you got a bad root. Because ultimately, you're not getting treated the way you want to get treated. And I know she's supposed to respect you, it's what the word says, but you've like made a living off of, she doesn't respect me. Okay, bro, I don't care how well you communicate or all the tips and tricks. It's just not going to work. What's got to happen is there's got to be an inside-out gospel revolution of your life where because Jesus loves you, you love her. And then it goes from like a feeling you have to all the actions that accompany what it looks like when a dude loves a girl. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Catholic sacraments. I know we got a lot of recovering Catholics at 1122, and this is one of the important things about the theological distinctions between our church and that line of reasoning or faith, is that the belief is that those things are imparting grace to you. We just came out of a grace series, as opposed to being a symbol of an inward working grace. You know, the imputation of righteousness from Christ versus the impartation through these different means. Very, very important difference.
You are correct.
Very, very,
like
very.
A fundamentally important one.
I was listening to the Sean Ryan podcast, and do y'all know him? Ex-Green Beret, yeah. And he had this exorcist on there, this Catholic priest.
Wow.
It's awesome. You know, it is really awesome. But the Catholic priest got into some Catholic doctrine, and Sean Ryan is like a brand new believer, and I'm just like, no. Oh, wow. Because he talks about the moment you get baptized as a baby, legally, the devil doesn't have hold of you anymore. God does until you sin the first time, and then you're back in the domain of darkness, and this is why you practice the sacraments to stay in a state of grace.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So Jesus would be like, nope. Mm-hmm. That's like, honestly, that's some stuff some people over about 1,500 years made up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They certainly made it up separate from the New Covenant and the teaching of the New Testament.
Which is why Martin Luther lost his mind when he was reading through the book of Romans, because that's not how it works. Jesus is our rescuer, not our liturgical activities.
That's where last rites came from, so that they could get you in real quick with some grace before you died.
Yeah, so you die in a state of grace.
Now, when he says, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit," it makes me think of some good fruit that's talked about elsewhere in the New Testament, the fruit of the Spirit. So, talk a little bit about that. Obviously, the Scripture interprets itself, so he's foreshadowing that in some way, right?
Yeah, Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And if you run that all the way down the layers, ultimately, all of those traits or behaviors are what we see demonstrated in the life of Jesus over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so Galatians 5 is the Apostle Paul's a different way of helping us understand what it means to be transformed into the image and likeness of Jesus Christ. And that as we're being transformed, these fruit grow. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is that these traits, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, we treat them as though there's feelings to chase, but the Bible treats them as though they're fruit that is growing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so love, before you ever feel anything, it is a fruit that has a seed that is coming from a place of God's grace and God's work, right? It's a fruit that's growing, not a feeling you're getting. Not to say it doesn't ever come with feelings, but you get what I'm tracking at. And so joy is not a feeling. It's a fruit. Mm-hmm. And same with peace is not a feeling. It's a fruit. And as our roots are getting deeper and deeper in the soil of the gospel, these things are growing in us. And so, but I think to think about it rightly, or to at least to help think about it rightly, is that there's the fruit, and everything that's good that God creates, the enemy counterfeits. And so all of these have an antithesis, if you will. So let's just talk through those for a second. So the way I categorize it, and I may not be all the way right, but the way I think about it is the opposite. So you have like a good list and an evil list.
Mm-hmm.
And the good list is the kingdom of God and the fruit of the Spirit of God, and the evil list is the kingdom of Satan and the unhealthy, diseased fruit that is growing from those trees, right? And so how do I know what fruit's growing? Well, so what's the opposite of love? Lust. Opposite of love is lust. It's actually not hate. You actually have to love something in order to have hate. And so that's a whole nother sermon that somebody else preached, and I can't remember. Oh, Chandler said that at indifference.
Yeah.
And so functionally in the life of, for you and for me, like the way I define love, and I think you've got a really good working definition of love is when your affection, attention, and desire are for another person and their highest good at great cost to yourself, I think is how you would word it. Lust is when your affection, attention, and desire are for a feeling that you get from another person or experience. That is a lust-based interaction. This is why you see so many marriages falling apart. They just can't sustain their lust for one another because they're ultimately they're using one another for their own feeling. And you know, they got into the hot bathtub in marriage. You know, you get in a warm bath and everything feels good for a little while, but pretty soon the water begins to it's not as warm anymore, and then all of a sudden the water will turn cold in different seasons, and it just takes work to stay.
A lot of different directions you can go with this illustration.
I'm just saying,
That's
you know, and when everything's lust, no problem. It just at some point you can't be that satisfaction for each other. That's because it's coming from this completely discontented, dissatisfied place versus the kingdom fruit of love that is rooted in the character and nature of God. So you could go down the list, but you know, joy, envy, peace, division, patience, hurry, kindness, indifference, that kind of stuff.
All right, go with me on this for a second. Pastor Joby, you talk about feelings as indicators of what's true, right? Or like they help us navigate life, but they're terrible God. And so the way that Satan is corrupting this idea of fruit is that he wants us to start by trying to feel, to then create reality. Because I do think that when you grow in the fruit of love, eventually you will feel more love, right? So, but the feeling is going to follow the truth of the fruit that's been produced by the Spirit.
Yeah,
right?
sometimes you'll feel love, and sometimes you'll feel great anguish because you do love.
Right.
You know, like I think about it. You have a baby, and and the first time they like coo and look at you or say dad, you feel all the feels, right? And then that same baby gets sick or hurt. Do you feel love then? That's not how you would describe it. You feel great anguish because you love this baby so much.
But trying to start with the feeling is an analogous of external modifications to try to change your insides.
It's just what Pastor Britt said, man. The way I like to say it is everything that God creates, the enemy corrupts. So feelings aren't bad, but then the enemy comes along and throws out lust of the flesh, which is the desire to feel. And so you desire to feel peace, but instead of finding peace in Jesus, you try to control all your circumstances, and what you're actually pursuing is comfort, but you're calling it peace. And then you say, I deserve to feel this way. Like this drink is going to calm me down and give me peace. And what begins to happen is you begin to self-medicate because Jesus isn't enough, and you're trying to manufacture peace by putting the parts together. And then that drink actually ends up being the thing that sucks all the peace out of your life because you drink too much. And this is how the enemy's so freaking tricky, man. I think it's really a good idea that when you read Galatians 5, first of all, it says, put away the works of the flesh. And then it lists a bunch of them, which are like the perverted passions of people that could even start from the right place. And then, but here are the things that are going to be produced on the inside. And so then if you say, well, then how do I live in more love and joy and peace and patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control? I think a great text is you go to John 15 because Jesus uses the same kind of gardening language. And he's like, you got to quit focusing on the fruit and you just abide in me, stay close to me, and I will do those things in you. But if you try to pursue those things, then you're missing it. You might end up trying to use me in pursuit of a feeling that you're going for, as opposed to you just get me and I will produce these things in you.
He says, going back to this Luke text, that the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good. And he's specifically going to refer to words. And so when he's talking about this fruit and tree analogy, he says it actually comes from the inside out. So, Pastor Britt, I know you have thoughts on this treasure word, that treasure idea, and it comes out as evidence primarily. He points specifically to words. We've been talking about these character traits, which I guess would be actions and words, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly nothing new. Jesus uses this word treasure quite a bit. And I think you were in Matthew 6 earlier. He talks a bit about it in Matthew 6 too. A lot of times, I think pastors will try to do like some gymnastics to not talk about what Jesus is actually talking about. But when Jesus is talking about treasure, he is talking about coin and the implications thereof. And so even though he goes to words right here, it is a direct connection to how do you know what is coin? Like, what is money? Money is ultimately the thing that we use in our culture, and they used in their culture back then to declare the value something has. And so a thing in and of itself is not valuable. We assign a value to that as soon as we put dollars on it. It's just a thing. And the cost of that thing is what makes it valuable or not. You're right. And so anytime Jesus points at treasure, especially treasure of the heart, what he's ultimately going to first is where your money goes. And then the second is where your time goes. The old preacher trick is show me your bank statement and your calendar, and I'll show you what you care about. And that's true. That's true, because these things reveal what you value. And so Jesus is saying, down in the core of who you are, there is something you value. And that thing comes out of you. And one of the ways it comes out of you is the words that you use. And the fastest way to not have to sit down and go through your checkbook and to not have to sit down and go through your calendar, the fastest way to take inventory of what's actually a value to you is just to listen to yourself talk. It's so funny. I was flying back from Texas recently, and there was this, I'm on the plane, and I'm like diamond medallion, so I get on early. But for whatever reason, I didn't hit the upgrade on this one. So I'm sitting in Gen Pop, and with all the commoners. I used to feel bad about the upgrade, but man, after
traveling up,
when you cross 1 million miles in the sky, you just don't feel that much. You don't feel that bad about it anymore. So anyway, I'm sitting in like the front of Gen Pop, but the way I board early, right? This is a long story, but I'm sitting a couple of rows back, and there's probably 9 people on the plane. It's a sold out plane. Probably 140 seats on the whole plane. It's pretty small. Well, I'm sitting there. I'm sitting down. I got my headphones in. This lady gets on the plane, and God bless her. It's like people who go through pre-check wearing combat boots, or they go through security and they have combat boots on with cowboy belt buckles and 4 jackets. You're like, have you never flown before? Like, do you have any idea how long it's going to take you to get these combat boots off and on to go through security right now? But whatever, to each his own. And so it's on the plane. This lady, she goes to lift her roller suitcase up to put it into the storage. And then she's like, oh, wait a minute. And she stops, gets down on her knees, puts her luggage in the middle of the aisle, unzips it, opens her entire luggage. There's a line of 80 people behind her trying to get on the plane. And she's going through her luggage, and she's just talking about, I've got to find that. I've got. That woman had no category for the fact that anyone else was on the planet. It didn't even cross her mind that there was more than 100 other people that were trying to get on the plane that she was then jamming up. So I'm sitting there, I got my headphones on, and everything in me wants to help this woman have a moment of self-awareness. Even though it was impacting me none, just the situation alone. I'm like, what are we doing? Have we lost our mind? And the whole time she's talking. And what she's talking, the words that are coming out of her mouth are me, 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 me. You don't understand why I need this thing, because she can tell people are starting to huff and puff. And I've got to finish this. She's starting to, you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So in her heart, at least in that moment, to give her the benefit of the doubt, at least in that moment, in her heart, she was the most important thing in the world. Her behavior was showing, I think I'm the most important thing in the world, and what I need and what I want is the most important thing in the world. And it was immediately coming out of her mouth. My thing is a bigger deal than your thing. And now, luckily, by God's grace, I just turned my music up, listen to my 49 Winchester, and called it a day.
You avoided being one of those viral videos.
100%.
Pastor goes berserk on the
Yeah, I don't do good. I'm certainly a snobby traveler. That said, that's like a real life situation. And I don't judge that woman too harshly. I do a little tongue in cheek here. I don't judge her too harshly, because I can't imagine the number of times my wife could point at something where she would go, you do realize that you were doing the me.
Yeah, see, most of us have enough social couth to not do that, because you got a brain on your head and you can just, get in line and get in your seat and hurry. And the lady's on the thing telling you every 5 seconds, please hurry to your seat and get out of the way so everybody can get on. And then yet, we would never encumber 100 strangers. And then yet, I've basically thrown a tantrum on the floor at my house, looking through my stuff, saying, hey, everybody in my house needs to stop right now because me. Isn't it crazy? Mm-hmm. You can be socially conditioned to not do that because you're a grown human. But then the people that you're around the most, you can show the least amount of fruit towards.
I think one of the things that Jesus is getting at here certainly is progressive sanctification.
Mm-hmm.
So are there still moments in my marriage, and will there be moments in my marriage, in my family, where I act selfishly? Yeah. Yeah, there will, because I'm a sinner. That said, as far as I can discern my own heart, and I don't mean this in any semblance of pride, I think my wife might say the same thing. The amount of time that I spend doing that after 18 years versus what I did in the first 18 months has changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even when I still may feel as quickly offended or quickly frustrated as I did in the first 18 months, how I respond because of the grace of God and the work of the Spirit of God and true love and true joy and true peace and true patience growing in my life is differently after 18 years than it was in 18 months. Maybe not every time, but more of the time.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I see sanctification. I'm happy to talk about my struggles. I do them publicly from the stage. I'm definitely not there yet. But for sure, I think it's interesting that the fruit of the Spirit, the leadoff batter's love, and the end of the train here is self-control. Almost all of us try to start with self-control. I'm going to do better. But yet, because of my growing relationship with Jesus, I have a lot more self-control in my life now, particularly when it comes to certain temptations, because I can look at that temptation and be like, I'm not going to do that. And it's the only thing I can attribute it to is that I have the ability to now control myself because I put the control of my life in Jesus' hands a long time ago. And the more I'm abiding in him, he's abiding in me. He's cutting off the branches of me that don't bear fruit. He's pruning me, and there's nothing I can do on my own, but yet with him, anything is possible. Mm-hmm. You put all this together, and these things are popping up in your life if you're a believer. Maybe not at the pace you hoped or that your wife hoped, but, there are times where you displayed patience in an area that you look at yourself and you go, God, that's not how I used to respond, and now I do. It's because the Spirit of God is at work in you.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up this process of sanctification, because I wanted to ask about that. Like, we've talked about this fruit being produced a lot from like a personal, almost reflective place. Like, oh, I'm producing more fruit. Let's talk about the social aspect of it, because to what degree is Jesus saying you should look at other people and watch for the fruit that they're producing? I mean, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, depending on the motives or like how they're saying, behavior modification. But what's the balance between letting somebody be on a journey of sanctification versus saying, hey, I don't see this fruit in your life, and where's the line when that becomes judging, or, you know what I mean?
Well, if you've got your mat carriers, you've deputized them to tell you when you're not displaying the fruit.
Right.
And so if the church would just do that, the conversation's over. Right? Because you would never be surprised if some rando came up and said, hey, man, I don't think you were very gentle. You're like, I know, my mat carriers have been telling me that for a while, but I'm leaning into Jesus to try to work on it. Thank you. You know what I mean? So we are responsible. And I think the key to having those 4 people in your life, and I got the number 4 from Mark 2 because 4 people carried the guy in on the mat, is to deputize that person is saying, I'm asking you to inspect me. I think where it gets real dicey is when we all just start inspecting one another. There's a type of person that is a Pharisee that runs to the front of the line, and they're the worst. I mean, I just had somebody, I do the Ask a Pastor thing on Undaunted Life, and one of the questions from one of the listeners was, in an age of such emotionalism in church, can I really believe if somebody just got saved, or should I wait on the fruit, or is that just a heart problem? And I was like, first of all, for sure that's a heart problem. If your instinct on the miracle of salvation is probably not, you ain't playing for Team Jesus. I mean, the Pharisees were the one that looked at the woman going, if he knew who was touching her, you know what I mean? Right. Like, they are the ones that are probably not. So that's a big part of it.
Somebody was just born. Let's wait and see if they can walk first before we decide if they're a person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you want to be very, very careful about that. Now, in discipleship, iron sharpening iron relationships, you've invited people to say, like, I don't know, in the farming analogy, you don't just get random people off the street to come tell you how to grow a tomato. But if you're on a farm, you've got people that you trust. Do you say, do we need to change the pH in the soil a little bit? How do you think the sweetness of this one is? So in the community of faith, that's a part of what we're supposed to have, Here's some areas where I see what the Bible says, the fruit that you're supposed to be producing, but I'm not seeing it in this area of your life. Because when you two guys do that to me, I know you're doing it for me because I've invited you into that kind of area, Yeah. It's like, it's the equivalent of asking a trainer to point out where your form is wrong. You're not mad. But if you're swole and some little twig comes and tells you how to do it in the gym, you're like, shut up, get out of my face.
Right.
But the guy you paid to instruct you, you want them to instruct you. So I hope you have those kind of accountable relationships in your life. But I think this happens in relationship.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things there. One, I don't think Jesus obviously has plenty to say about accountability and Christian brotherhood and sisterhood in mat carriers, certainly. I think specifically in Luke chapter 6, he's just stating it as an assumed fact. A tree will bear fruit. It is either a good tree or a bad tree. And so he's not saying walk around and see which trees bearing which fruit. He's just stating it as a fact. Trees will bear fruit. And so I think that's one side of it. I think the one thing he says, though, is for each tree is known by its fruit. I think this is interesting because what does it actually mean to be known? What he's saying is by the fruit that's hanging off the tree, you can know what's happening in the guts of that tree.
Yep.
You can know what's happening in the roots.
Right.
You can know what's happening in the soil. And that tree could, if this was Lord of the Rings and trees could walk and talk, that tree could try to convince you. A lemon tree could all day try to convince you that it is an apple tree. But if you see lemons, it does not matter what it says. That is a lemon tree. That's what Jesus is saying.
So back to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, because it's like the prequel to what he says in Luke 6. He says, beware false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Okay, So if you're like, that might be a wolf. If after a week or two, there's 6 or 8 sheep missing because he killed them, then you know. So beware of the pastor that says he's there to serve the sheep, and after a while, he's abused the sheep for his own profit. Time will tell would be a modern way of saying this.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the words conversation, and he goes on in verse 46 of this text. He starts talking about, he says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you?" And it's like, this is an issue that plagues Christians, right? Like, talk is cheap, talk is easy. I mean, you say, Pastor Joby, a lot of times when you're preaching, what the hardest part about being up there is like, everybody looks great, right? Like they're all singing loud, but I don't know what's going on in the heart. So what is he talking about? Unpack that a little bit for us, and why is it important to add actions to these words?
Ask me that question in one sentence. I don't know if I'm smart enough to hold all that intention.
What's he pointing at with this very pointed question? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you?
I think it is the summation question of the entire point of Jesus' coming to the earth. So that is a loaded discussion for sure, but I think lordship is, if you were to boil all of the New Testament's teachings down, and even the point of why Jesus came to the earth, I think it singularly narrows to the point of lordship. That the entire point of Jesus coming to earth as the Son of God was that he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and to make the redemptive path by which people could be surrendered and submitted under his lordship. And so it was a declaration of the kingdom of God, of which he is the king. So I think that is the question. Why do you call me Lord and not do what I say? How do you know that Jesus is your Lord? You do what he says.
Yep.
And that's it.
Goes to that, he doesn't save last names thing, right? Like, you don't inherit faith from your grandparents.
Yeah, it's a single file line into heaven. It reminds me of I've told this before, when the Crusaders, they would get baptized before they went to kill people in the name of Jesus. And they would get baptized, but they would keep the hand with their sword in it outside of the water because they knew that they were going to do some unholy things with that hand. And I think today's sword outside of the water is people have like sex and sexuality in one hand and their wallet in the other. They're like, all right, Lord, I'm going to call you Lord. I'm going to sing the songs. I'm going to go to many messages. I might get in a group. But then there's other areas where you just decide, I mean, the liberal progressive church has just tried to jumble up the words of Jesus and the New Testament and really the whole Bible cover to cover in regards to sex and sexuality. Just a cardinal in the Catholic Church just said same-sex sex is okay as long as it's in a committed relationship. I think Jesus would say, why do you call me Lord and not do what I say? So, or the other one is money. People are like, yeah, he's my Lord, but I'm not bringing first and best. Forget the 10% thing. And they begin to do a bunch of gymnastics on how they can keep more money for themselves. When I get into these kind of theological issues, sometimes I'll say, if Jesus himself showed up in your bedroom tonight and said, that's a sin, stop, would you? The answer to that question tells you everything. Yeah. Everything.
It makes me think of, I didn't grow up Baptist, but went to a lot of Baptist VBSs.
Of course you did.
And it makes me think of this cheap grace, like, hey, you walk the aisle, and then people like, it's the get out of hell free idea. Like, as long as I say this, and they will abuse texts like 1 Corinthians 12:3, where it says, well, you can't say he's Lord apart from the Spirit, or Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth, you'll be saved. So they're trying to disconnect obedience from this. And Jesus is like, effectively saying you don't get that option. See the book of James.
That's right.
Yeah, and even the verses, even the Lord verses, I mean, Romans 10:13 says, for all who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. But Matthew 7 says, all who say to me, Lord, Lord, will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. So what's the difference? So there's obviously some people that are doing this just with their mouth only, externally. This is why I think Paul in Romans 10:13 says, call on the name of the Lord. So like to pray in Jesus' name means to submit, surrender, align yourself with the character and nature. That's all that's wrapped up in the name of the Lord.
Right.
So all who call on the name of the Lord, when they say like, Lord, I'm submitting and surrendering me, I want to align my character and nature with yours, and I'm calling on the name of the Lord, is very different than somebody that just said, Lord, Lord, in a service one time. That's the distinction. And you know it's the distinction because in Matthew 7, when they're like, what you mean we don't know you? And they begin to not talk about abiding in him like John 15. They immediately give a religious resume of the things they had done. And that means they're a false prophet because their fruit was manufactured, not produced from the inside out. They were just trying to do stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, Brendan Manning writes it like this. He says that trust is our gift back to God. And he finds it so enchanting that Jesus died for the love of it. And ultimately, what Jesus came to the earth to secure for himself, for the Father, unto the glory of God, for all of eternity, is his children's trust. He had to provide the way, the want, the means, the how, the when. He had to do all the work in order for God's kids to be able to trust him and enjoy him forever. And I think that's a really fascinating thing to think about, that trust is our gift back to God. And he's just so wild about his kids trusting him that he came and got it for himself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the word trust is a better translation of the Greek word pisteuo that we translate faith, because currently in English, faith, it just kind of means like hope, or I don't know what it means.
Affirming a good idea.
Yeah. So trust, though, like my diving board illustration, my dad's in the water saying jump. And for me to pisteuo in him is not to believe, just stand on the diving board like, yep, that's him, but to trust him. And then, so the Bible says without faith or without trust, without pisteuo is the word. Without pisteuo, it is impossible to please God. That's the core of everything. God is going, come on, just trust me. You can't trust you. But trust me.
Yeah, so that's what Jesus is asking. Why do you say you trust me and you don't?
Right.
Well, Jesus, how do I know that I don't? Because you don't do what I tell you to do.
Which by definition means he's not your Lord.
Right.
Like, I'm not even trying to beat people up, man. I'm really not. You can do whatever you want to do. You're just not a Christian.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, after last week's sermon, or 2 weeks ago, I got several emails when I was talking about whatever angers the heart of God should anger us, and da-da-da-da. And this lady's like, I'm leaving the church. I've been a Christian my whole life. First of all, the moment somebody says that, you're not paying attention. So, and I'm leaving because how dare you tell women what to do with their bodies? And, it's their body and their choice. And if they want to abort a baby, and like 3 or 4 things. And then 3 times she wanted to make sure that I knew she was a Christian. All right, you can label yourself whatever you want. If Jesus is your Lord, you do what he tells you to do, period. And according to the scripture, life begins, first of all, it's God's idea, begins at conception. And it's up unto the Lord as long as that person lives, not unto your own decision. And so if you can't submit and surrender to that, you do have a Lord, but it is your political ideology that is ruling, and you're trying to fit Jesus into it. That's what the people, when they're like, yeah, but all who say, Lord, Lord, will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And so be very, very careful. If you have an ideology, it could be very conservative too. A lot of people have this like conservative ideology, and then they try to fit Jesus into it, as opposed to Jesus is my king, and what he says rules and reigns my life, not me. And then I am a servant to that king and to his kingdom.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have to remember is that it's the want to, right? I want to get to the place by the power of the grace of God at work in me where I want to only do what Jesus wants me to do. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense.
And-
Marriage is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Gretchen's out of town right now. She's on a girls' trip. She gets back today. This morning before I left, I'm genuinely not trying to get brownie points. I'm thinking, what can I do for her to walk in the door to have the best experience she can have while she's been gone? You know what I mean? I can be a bit of a tornado in the house, and she likes it clean. So I'm cleaning up, not simply because I just want her to, I'm sure she had a good time. She went to somewhere with a bunch of church girls, and I'm like, what she values is valuable to me now because I value her, right? I'm not trying to say, I'm not standing on my own rights. I'm trying to do what would just value her. The same, it's very true in your relationship with the Lord too. You know, instead of saying, God, why don't you do this for me? It shifts into, you've done everything for me. Would you help me live a life that reflects that?
Yeah.
That's very different postures.
Because if you say you love Gretchen and don't ever do anything to serve her, then it's like, do you? Do you really?
Dude.
You know? And that's what Lord means. Lord means I love you and I will obey you.
I asked this question in
I trust you.
In the two arenas. I don't do very much marriage counseling, but if I find myself talking to a husband and it's all jacked up at home, or it's because it's the same thing, man. It's the same mindset. Or I talk to a Christian that is trying to figure out what's the minimal they have to do to still be on the team. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Okay, because it's the same mindset. The husband trying to like be served and not served, and the person saying, what's the minimal I have to do to be? I just say I could say, bro, do you love God? I mean, let's make this as kindergarten as possible. Do you love God? If you love God, you'll want to do everything He tells you to do because you trust Him and you know it's for your best. Or in your marriage, bro, do you love your wife? Well, then quit fighting all the time. Okay, you're right. Congratulations. What does that have to do with anything? You're right, and she's mean, and she doesn't. Sweet. What are we even talking about? Do you love her? Because if you do, you know what you'll do? You'll do what Jesus did for you. He didn't try to be right. And those things it's the same thing. It's really interesting that when Jesus talks to Peter, He doesn't say, will you do better? When He's reinstating him.
John 21.
He says, do you love me?
Yeah.
This is kind of why you call me Lord, Lord, don't do what I say. He could also just go, do you love me? Because, earlier in John, or John's a different book, in John, he goes, if you love me, you'll do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
Because you trust me. Like to love me is to trust me, then you'll do what I say because it's better.
Yeah. So he's saying that the evidence of lordship is obedience. And then he closes this section with yet another analogy. He says, if you hear these words and do them, i.e. you obey, your life could go one of two directions. And he paints a bleak picture and a very positive picture. It's a picture of a house. If it's built on a good foundation, then it's going to survive storms and floods. And if it's built on the sand, it just collapses so easily. So why does he use that analogy, Pastor Britt?
Yeah, because the options are not to trust or not to trust. You will trust something. And if you trust Jesus and the rock of that foundation is the gospel of Jesus Christ and the empty tomb, then when life's storms rise and you're facing kid pain, you're facing marriage hard, you're facing financial hurt, because your life is built on the gospel, which is the greatest revealed promise of God kept, promise made by God, promise kept by God. You're reminded that God keeps His promises. And even though in the middle of the storm, it feels like all hell's breaking loose, your life is on a firm foundation that will stand. And ultimately we know who has the victory. And so that's when we trust. But if we trust in the kingdom of self, if we trust in the gospel it's not good news, but the the message of me and the fruit of the kingdom of either my flesh or of the kingdom of Satan, if I put my trust there, then it's a shaky foundation. And when the storms come, I've always said, and I've learned this in my own life, that pain is the great revealer. And when we go through seasons of great pain, it reveals what your life is built on. And your two choices are either to fall deeper down the habitual circle of yourself, or to fall deeper into love and into trust with God. And you see it all the time. People get hurt. This is where like deconstructionism comes from in our world. People get hurt by someone, and then all of a sudden they just begin to totally deconstruct everything because they got hurt. And I'm not saying that hurt is legitimate, no question about it. But there's something greater and there's something more powerful than that hurt. And it really goes down to what was at the spiritual battery to begin with? What was the foundation? What was this actually built on? Was it my experience? Was it my pursuit of pleasure? Or was it my delight and satisfaction in the gospel of Jesus Christ? So
yeah, I think this connecting this passage with the idea of trust, I think is really, really helpful for anybody that listens to the Deepen podcast that wants to go deeper in their faith with Jesus. Mm-hmm. So in the places of pain and the places of struggle and the places of confusion, maybe a fundamental question is like, do I trust God? Because if you tease out this illustration, it's like, guy's going to build a house, and God says, "Hey, man, you should build it right here. Trust me." Mm-hmm. And the man's like, "If you go, I got this. It ain't going to go good." Yeah. And you're right. When the storms come, as you were talking about that, like pain reveals what your foundations are. I'm reminded of our friend Josh Turner, and they have a daughter named Riley. She's awesome, man. She's severely special needs. She's just like preached at a youth group or something. By the way, she was told she'd never live, she'd never talk, she'd never, all these things. So she's come a long, long way. But you can imagine the trauma it is to go through this. And he and Becca, his wife, they had no idea this was coming until she was born. And so we've heard the stories a bunch of times. And one of the things that Josh will say that he learned the most through this whole situation, and he's not saying this from a point of pride whatsoever, because he's still got a million questions. He'll say, "I really love Jesus. I really love him." Like, his love and trust for Jesus came out when he was shook the most. Because even though he was confused and, still, especially as a dad, it's one thing to talk theologically about the sovereignty of God, but when you got a special needs child and you ask, did this happen because he wanted it to, or did he allow it? And you get into all that whirlwind, and where he landed is that he had built his life on the solid rock of Jesus, and he loves and trusts Jesus, even if he still can't understand what's happening or the why. Yeah.
We sing this song called Firm Foundation, and there's this part of the song that says, rain came, winds blew, my house was built on you. And when I sing that, it's kind of like this, it's this prophetic hope that I'll be able to say that. I mean, yes, the storms are coming, and it's not like, hey, look, I made it through because I doggone it, I'm smart, It's like, no, my house is built on you, and through every storm, I will make it. And I think, as I think about, we're towards the end of this year, Pastor Joby, this 2024, and we focused on abundant life a lot. And if you think about it in this regard, like Jesus saying, if you obey me, you're going to have a life of abundance, and you're going to end your life with the real treasure.
Yeah, I'd also remind you, he says this is how he closes his sermon. So maybe, maybe money and words aren't, maybe you're crushing it, right? Maybe the words that come out of your mouth are constant. They're just kind and good. Some of it could just be learned behavior. There's some mean old women. They don't say mean stuff because they don't say cuss words. You know what I'm saying? And maybe you were taught right to bring your first and best. But it wouldn't be a terrible idea, though, to look back over his sermon here, because there's a lot about loving enemies and judging people. He's talking about the whole teaching that I just gave you. If you love me and you call me Lord, then you'll do what I say. And in so doing, you will be blessed. even if your whole life is that of taking on the hurricane, there is blessing in the obedience because it's a better way to go.
Yeah. And your house will stand.
Yeah, ultimately.
It'll stand.
One day the rain will stop because you'll go to heaven. Yeah, and you'll be with him.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to this series to unpack more questions that Jesus asks. Thank you, pastors. I don't know who wants to close in prayer, but...
Why don't you do it?
Father, we love you. Thank you for your word. Jesus, thank you that you loved us first and that you came and are the way, the means, the how. You give us the want to. You've done all the work. And for us, we have the privilege, the pleasure of trusting you, knowing that you are the only place that our trust is truly safe for all of eternity. So we just pray that through the series, you would help us to have eyes to see areas of our life where we have opportunity to trust you more, to fall more in love with you. We have the opportunity for our minds to be challenged and be renewed and transformed so that we can think rightly and we can surrender unto your lordship. Lord, we want to want you. And we pray that you would help us and our desires for you would grow as we better understand your love and desires for us. And so thanks for this time. Thanks for this conversation. Thank you for my brothers. Thank you for our church family. Thank you for all that you're doing and all that we get to be a part of. But most importantly, thank you for what you've done, for the cross and for the resurrection, for saving us, for giving us a chance at true eternal life. And we give you all the glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. The end.
You nailed it.